Hello, this is Leo from Studio Moondowner, and today I want to show to you the level importer of Afterthought. We also use this level importer during the production of the game, which means that every level inside the game has been built with the same tool. That means you will be able to use all of the special features of our level designs, which is pretty amazing in my opinion. So, the levels in Afterthought are represented by SVG files that can be modified in any possible way. Before we dive deep into the subject, I want to show to you the archive, where you can find all of the levels that are part of the game. The archive is located on your local drive where you have installed the game, so if you go to Manage Creations in the Level Importer, then to Import New Level, you will find this button here, Open Directory. And that's where we want to go now. So inside here we have the saved folder, and if we go to Streaming Assets and then to Level Importer, we will find the archive with all of the levels that are located inside the game. So let's go to Cycle 1 here and double click on the file of the first level. So here you can now see an SVG file, which is long for Scalable Vector Graphics. It consists of basic shapes like rectangles and circles and things like that. We also have lines. And yeah, the objects which are later spawned inside the game are represented by pretty intuitive shapes, like for example the collision shapes here are black rectangles. And the blue objects are represented by blue circles. We will also find the starting point inside here, which is always a green circle. And we will find the level end, which is always a yellow circle. So as a program we are using Inkscape here. It is a very powerful and intuitive open source program for editing vector graphics. You can also use other tools, but I would highly recommend Inkscape because we have already experienced some issues during the import. Especially for example if you're using Adobe Illustrator and you get the wrong SVG settings, there might be some problems later. Also, if you use Inkscape with our demo files from the archive, you will already have the nice raster inside of your file. So it helps when you have already worked with vector graphics, but if you follow some simple guidelines it should be rather easy for anyone. If you feel unsure, you should always start your level by using the default.svg, which you will find first inside of the archive here. And we have another copy, and I would recommend that you use that one inside your save folder, and then go to Level Importer, and here we have the file. I'm gonna duplicate that file now because that's what you should also do if you start building your first level. And I'm gonna rename it to something like my level. So now we can open this file and start working inside there. Inside here you will find all types of objects that you can use for your level creations. Also you will find a detailed documentation for all of the object types, if you wonder about design guidelines or stuff like that. So here we can see we have all types of level geometry. We have red and blue objects. We have red and blue walls. We have the platform, which we will probably use in a platformer. Then you can find the fog zones from cycle 2. You can find the red and blue arrows from cycle 3. Also big red arrows and big blue arrows. Then you will find the skill cancel zone and the gravitation zone from cycle 4. Then we have the moving objects from cycle 5, which will basically be looping between 2 points. We have the wind zones from cycle 6. And you can use the red objects with a blue shell or the blue objects with a red shell from cycle 7. And for cycle 8 we have the 2 different types of time zones, which make the timescale either faster or slower. And we have the rotating wheels with 2 different directions for the rotation, which you can also attach objects to. In the end we have everything that we need for level ends. We have these keys that you have to hit for the level end to unlock. We have a yellow wall. We have a line ending and we have an ending point, which are the 2 different types of endings inside the level that you can have. So now if we scroll back to the beginning, we also see some values of the player, which might be pretty important to you, and now you will also see why we are working with a grid here. You can see some values of the player, like for example the height of the player, which is estimatedly 4 blocks, and the width of the player, which is 2 blocks. So never make a gap smaller than that. And we also have some guidelines for placing collision, which you should probably read through before you start building your levels or before you start doing fancy stuff inside your levels. We will also provide a detailed tutorial for all types of world gimmicks that we have just shown if you want some advice on how to work with them. Also just feel free to experiment with all of the stuff to get cool interactions. So if it is your first time using a vector graphics program, you can simply choose the selection tool on the top left. And with this tool you can choose any object and move these objects. You can scale the objects. Like for example, now I'm having a skill cancel zone here and I'm scaling it. Whoop. And for some objects you also will need to rotate them, which you can do like that. For example, for wind zones and arrows you will need to rotate them. So this arrow is currently pointing upwards. It's a bit hard to tell if it's pointing upwards or downwards, but in the beginning every arrow is pointing upwards, so now we can rotate it in any direction that we want the arrow to point in. So for the beginning I would recommend to you to work inside the copy of the default.svg file like we are just doing here. Inside here we can now choose all types of level geometry that we do not want to use for our first level and delete them. So now we can choose multiple objects by simply selecting them like this. And if we want to delete some more stuff we can hold shift and select some more objects that we want to delete, because we do not need them right now for our first level. So pressing the delete button, see what happens. And I think that's basically all we need. We can also delete the texts now because we will not need them. We can decide now, are we using a point ending or a line ending? I'm gonna go for the point now. We do not want a yellow wall in this level. And yeah. So now everything is pretty empty. Also gonna delete all of the texts here in the beginning. So I'm always just pressing the delete button here after selecting the things that we do not want. So now we're gonna be using blue objects, red objects, blue walls, red walls, and a platform probably for our first level. Oh yeah, and this text. So it will be a rather simple level in the end. So now we still have these grayish boxes here. These things are also collision, but they are linked to a level boundary, meaning that there will be a camera boundary if you set one of these. And that means that the camera will basically not be moving across this line here, which is 10 blocks away from the block. And if the player is gonna walk over that line, he will be blocked by the collision here. So yeah, we can see it here, it's 10 blocks away from the starting point. And now we want to make the level much shorter. So I'm just gonna get this collision type here and put it over there. I'm gonna select the ending point, which is very important for every level. It's gonna set it somewhere like here. And I'm gonna select the level boundary, which I have just talked about, and place it 10 blocks away from the level end so that the player can still see the end. So we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So we need it to be here. And now we can also see again why we are working on the grid. So yeah, we can do these things much shorter now, which is not really necessary because the player will not see them anyways. And yeah, that's what the level looks like now. So yeah, thinking about the starting point and the ending point is probably the first thing you have to do. You will make the decision, is the level going upwards or is the level going to the right or somewhere downwards. So now we've just decided for a rightwards direction. So if we're gonna start building that level now, we just want to duplicate all of these objects here, or the objects that we need. So yeah, how are we building a level now? Basically the first thing one could do is always building a gap that the player has to jump above. So we're doing it like this maybe. Just gonna hit Ctrl D here in order to duplicate objects. And yeah, this is gonna be the first gap. We're gonna make this one a bit higher so that the player has to somehow jump above this. And yeah, probably move it a bit more to the right here. So now we have the first obstacle for the player. And yeah, I think this is a pretty good point to put a red wall here, or a red floor in this case, that the player cannot touch or has to block. So if you're working with the grid now, you should always try to work on the big cells at first. So meaning these ones, and if you zoom in you will sometimes see smaller ones. If we're using red walls, it's always good to have them like 2 blocks thick or 2 blocks high, so that the player can see them best. You can also do, of course, something like that, but that will be really aggressive on the visual level, so we're trying to avoid that now. And yeah, now we have the first obstacle here, and we want to give the player some opportunities, so we're going to put a blue orb here, and we're going to put our red orb above that one. So yeah, the player has to have some trajectory like this to fly through. If the player is flying like this, he has to block something. So yeah, that's how we're doing it now. I'm just gonna delete this stuff here now because we don't need it anymore. So another good thing for level building is if you always build in what we call a speed check. That means it's basically a wall going through from the bottom to the top. So if the player has a lot of speed now, it will be hard to pass this obstacle without losing the speed. And again, we're gonna build in some opportunities here. Of course, first you can think of displace. The player can always displace through this wall, which will be quite cheap. And yeah, we're having a little gap on the bottom here, and I want to build a second gap now that can only be used with dash. So how are we doing this? Again, duplicating the objects, scaling them a bit, and building our second gap. And now we need one of these 45-degree walls. So now we are clicking 2 times on our collision shape, and we're gonna rotate it. And now if you wanna set this thing to the grid, because as you can see it's not on the grid anymore if you just rotate it, you can use another tool up here. It's beneath the selection tool. With that one you can select only points. And yeah, now I'm gonna move these points here off the rectangle onto the grid. And now everything is good again. If you still remember, the player is 4 boxes high, so now the player could still get through there without using dash. If you're using dash, the player is still 2 boxes high, so we're gonna make it like this. And now the player cannot walk through, but the player can dash through this thing. Which will be a pretty cool gameplay gimmick later. Now it's probably a good time also for a platform, because if the player is already using dash here, the player can still dash on that platform. We're gonna try to make it snap to the grid on the middle of the line. It's not really bad if you have something like this, so that the top line of the platform is on the grid, but it will be a bit better if you do it like this. Especially if you're trying to build things like this, then the line will be going through, and if you do it like this, there will be a very tiny corner that the player can stumble over. And we do not want that to happen. So now we're having our first obstacle, we're having our second obstacle, and now we're gonna build a third one. Probably one that the player cannot displace through. So I'm gonna make this one really thick now. We're also gonna use the blue wall now. Blue walls are something that the player can hit in order to get a reset. So it's always good if you're going upwards and you have a blue wall next to you. That's why we're building this obstacle a bit higher now. Sometimes a bit hard to let the objects snap to the grid. But yeah, if you're patient like me now, you will always get the snap that you want. And as I already told you, it's always best to work on the big cells at first, and if you're going to do details later, you can use the small cells here. So now this is our obstacle. And we still need to give the player some opportunity here on the bottom. Probably gonna make this one a bit higher. And Gonna make a little platform here to dash on. Now you can see the player has this ledge here that he can dash on, and yeah, chain some dashes if we give him more platforms like this. So this is the first one, this is the second one, and now we're gonna build a third one. You can also look that the distance is always the same, so this one is now 2, 4, 6, 7, we're gonna make it 8 blocks. 2, 4, 6, 7 and another 8 blocks. So that's where we are building the level end now. And yeah, now the player has two options here. He can go upwards and he can go downwards. I think I'm also gonna add some platforms here to dash on. And another platform on top. Again, working with a 4 blocks distance here. 2, 4, 2, 4. And gonna snap the middle point of the line to that thing. So, what else can we add? We can add some more objects now, and I also think the ceiling is a bit too low now, because I already told you that the camera will be blocked off by this big level boundary, so we're gonna move it a bit higher. Probably even higher, we'll just see it later if we test the level. I think we can also move this little thing a bit higher then. Getting our 2 blocks again for the dash. And yeah, of course we need more objects now, because the level is still a bit empty. So we're gonna add some objects here on top. I think I'm also gonna duplicate that red wall here. Another important thing, if you're using red floors like this here, you should not just move them inside the collision, because that will sometimes lead to weird interactions. So now we're building like a very small shell for this thing here. And yeah, it's always better if you build it like this, because then you will not have weird interactions. Somewhere in the documentation you will also see that you should not make intersections between objects that often. So the first reason for this is if we have an intersection like probably this one, we cannot see it that well anymore if you click out of it. And another reason is also weird interactions. So if you're placing like 3 collision types inside each other, there can be some weird things happening. We don't want that, of course. So now we are having our objects here. We also need some objects on the bottom. Gonna place them right in the middle between these platforms here. And yeah, now we wanna change the type of this object. So this is a blue orb right now. So everything in the level importer is about color codes, and you will find most of the important colors on the bottom here, which are, for example, red and blue, and the yellow thing for the ending. And basically all of these colors here are used for different types of zones in the game. But if you really want to enter a color code, because some of them will be a bit more complicated, you can click to the top here and go to fill and stroke. And then yeah, this window here will open. And if you go to the fill color, you will always see this tiny box here where you can enter the color code. So the color code for red is now FF and 4 zeros. You can also see here on the bottom the color code of the color you've currently selected. And that's basically how you would change the color. If you, for some objects, you also need to change the color of the stroke. All objects inside Inkscape can have a stroke, meaning a little line surrounding the object. And yeah, if we're setting a stroke here, we can see on the bottom left of the program the thickness of the stroke. It's usually good if it's somewhere around 0.0 or for some cases 1. And yeah, now we're having a red object with a blue shell, which you probably remember from Cycle 7. And I think we're just gonna keep that one here to see how the stroke color is now affecting the object and turning it into another object later when we build the level. So I think we're gonna put the level end a bit higher here. We have 2 paths now to reach the level end. We have one bottom path going here and we have a top path going here. And I think for the bottom path we also need some object around here that will give the player a real good opportunity. So we're gonna build something like that. A cluster of 4 blue objects. And if the player detonates that one with a bolt, he will get launched into the ending very quick. Gonna put it a bit more to the bottom. And yeah. Now another thing about speed in this game. Speed will often change the direction if you put a good collision shape somewhere. So if we're now getting this bolt explosion here, the player will get launched somewhere around here. And then the speed will be transferred to the right because of the angle of that ceiling right here. So that's why I'm putting this thing here now, and then the player will hopefully get launched towards the end now. We also need to test this one later and see how it works out. And probably for the top path I'm thinking about something like this now. So the player has to stomp down here if he's reaching the end. Okay, I think that's a pretty cool level for now, so we're gonna test it. And for that we're going to the game now. So opening Afterthought, going to Manage Creations, Import New Level. Here we already have the path where we have been working. You can always check, of course, if you're on the right path right now. So I have named the level My Level. Simply gonna enter that here and import it. So now you will find a new level inside the list. We're gonna click that one. And yeah, we can adjust a lot of things now. The first one will be the visual design of the level. We have a lot of options here for the color of the black collision, the color of the red and the blue walls. And yeah, a lot of other things too. I will simply choose random here now. So yeah, we can see how that affects the level. Yeah, we can also use some pre-settings for cycle 1 and all the other cycles inside the game. So you will see these are the styles now. But yeah, I'm gonna go for random again. And the only thing I can tell you here is that you should always look out for the contrast of these objects, because sometimes if you're using a blue object it will not fit to the background you're using, especially these blue backgrounds from cycle 6 are sometimes hard to use with special types of blue objects. So now we don't really have a contrast here and the player will not see the object that well. So I'm probably also gonna change the blue object now a bit. So that would be one that you could see better. Yeah, probably this one, that looks good. And another thing we have are generic objects. I'm simply gonna tick some boxes here and you will see later what it does. Basically these are random objects that will be placed inside of the level later. So I'm gonna add some trees, I'm gonna add some lanterns here. And yeah, probably some grass, and gonna make a bit more grass. You also have like a density here. These objects will later be randomly placed inside the level. And now I'm gonna go back. We have set the visual design. We can also think about restrictions, meaning for example which skills can the player actually use, or can the player only use one skill with a selection of all 5. But it will be a solo skill level then. And yeah, I've already built some opportunities for dash inside of my level now. So I could think about switching all the other skills off and force the player to use dash. But I don't want to do that now. I can probably say, okay, the player can only use 2 skills in this level now. Okay, so now we're going back. We can also set the metadata. Here you can set the description and the level name. I'm just gonna keep things here. You can also set the soundtrack of the level to the one you like most, or probably one that fits the level most. I don't know, I'm gonna take a gameplay track from cycle 3 here. You will only find tracks inside here that you have already unlocked inside the game. If you want to have access to all tracks, you can also buy the soundtrack over Steam, and that will work too. And later we have to take a screenshot inside of the level, using the level cam, and another thing that we will talk about later is the creator score of the level. So now I'm still having turned on this auto re-import SVG button. That means that every time we change something later inside of the level it will be re-imported immediately. At some point you should probably switch that one off if you're done doing your level, because if you do not switch that off, your creator scores might be deleted if the level gets changed in any way. So yeah, that's how this works, and in the end we can of course publish the level, but for now we're just gonna test it. So now we can finally see the level that we have just built, and yeah, I said I wanted to use dash here, so I'm gonna equip dash, and my second skill will be bolt, I think. So let's go and see what the level will feel like when we play it. So we're having our first obstacle. only 2 skills available, as you can see on the bottom left. Then we can dash here on the latches. And yeah, we have the red object with a blue shell, because we've set the stroke color here. And that's what I told you about, this blue thing that can be hit with a single bolt, something like that. And then the ceiling will launch us right into the ending. Okay, that went pretty well, but I think we can be much faster. So, for the launch I'm gonna start with something like that. Another one. Now trying to get the top path and do something like that. Oh yeah, that went really fast now. So an interesting fact, you will always get an S ranked when you first play your level, because that should motivate players to also get S ranks, and yeah, that's what the scale will look like then. So that's how the creator score works now. So let's see, we can go back into the level now. And I think I'm gonna change some things about this level now, because yeah, we still have the file open and we can always make adjustments. So one thing in the beginning I would like to have some blue objects. You might probably remember my dash with the bolt, and yeah, let's see if I can maybe dash with a bolt into this thing and get a stronger launch in the beginning. And another thing I thought about was to maybe make here the top path a bit harder. So I'm gonna put something like this here, these blue objects, turning them red. And yeah, now the player has to get a very precise stomp here or hit the block button while stomping. That's gonna make things a bit harder now. Hitting save, that's always important of course. Going back to the game, and now if I restart the level, then the new objects will be spawned. So that's what this auto re-import SVG setting did that we've just enabled before. Now getting my launch here. Oh yeah, I think we can put this path a bit higher now on the top. Just gonna go to the file again. Yeah, so we're still gonna keep that obstacle here, but move it a bit higher because of the strong launch with the 2 blue objects here in the beginning. And yeah, we want it to be 2 boxes high again so that we can only dash through and not use other skills there. And let's see how that goes then. So hitting the restart button, doing our launch, and now it's all a bit higher. Easier to reach, easier to dash on the platform, and we can do something like that. So now another thing I would probably change is make the top path a bit harder, because now it's getting pretty easy to use it. So one thing I'm thinking about is moving this here a bit upwards. Probably moving this object a bit to the left, so that we can hit it if we're good enough. Let's see what this does to the level then. Again, hitting the restart button. And see how it's going. Okay, yeah. Now that's a bit harder to overcome. Let's see if we can get some skill combo. Okay, something like that. That was fun. So I think we're just gonna keep the level like this now. We've got a new creator score. And yeah, let's go back to the LevelImporter then. Now we could still make adjustments to the visual design. We could change the restrictions, but as we've already got a creator score now, if we change the restrictions, the score will be deleted. If we go to metadata, we can see our score now. This is what people are challenged to beat when they download the level. And yeah, we also see that we still need to take a screenshot, so let's go back to the level. And to the level cam and see where we want to take our screenshot. Maybe somewhere around here. And take the screenshot. And yeah, now we've got it. So let's go to metadata, and the screenshot is there now. So now that we're done with the level, we can switch off the auto re-import SVG setting so that our creator score doesn't get deleted anymore. And we can finally go to publish. The upload can take a while, depending on the size of your SVG file and how many objects you put inside there. You can of course go crazy, but I would recommend to not build a very big level. And we finally got it! So you will probably get redirected to the Steam overlay, or you can open it yourself and find your level in the workshop now. That's where people can subscribe to it and download it and play it inside the game later. Also we see that we have some tags added here, 2 skill combo, less than 10 seconds for the creator speedrun, and the skills that are available inside of the level, meaning all in this case. And that's how we got to our first level now. You can of course always update your level if you change something later on. That was it with the introductory tutorial now. I would say have fun with all of the levels you can find online and try to beat all of those creators, or just enjoy all of the cool levels without any pressure.